Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. Today, I'm here with a special guest, none other than Devin, also known as Run the NBA. Hi, how's it going, my man?
It's going pretty good, man. It's going pretty good.
Love to hear that. Yeah. So we're gonna have a lot of topics we're gonna be talking about today. You guys already know we have the 20 questions at the end, but I think the first thing that we should talk about is just how good the Philadelphia 76ers have been playing as of late. They did go on a 7-game winning streak. Unfortunately, it just ended, and that's always how it goes. Every time I record one of these videos, everyone's going on a streak, and then like the streak, goes the other way. But I mean, just they're 8-2 in their last 10. And they've looked kind of like a better team. The first like month and a half, they kind of were slow. And I know Harden missed some time and Maxey missed some time, and now they're all back. But I guess, like, what do you make of, the way the Sixers have been playing lately? Embiid, again, looking like an MVP candidate. James Harden starting to come into his own. What do you see from Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, even with guys being in and out of the lineup to start the year, they just didn't even look that great when they were healthy to begin the year. But it finally looks like this team is starting to come together. As you mentioned, James Harden is starting to play some really good basketball again, which is probably the best stretch of basketball we've seen him play in Philadelphia, other than the
Mm-hmm.
immediate aftermath from when he arrived there. And you mentioned Embiid's been on a great run. I mean, he's putting himself right back in MVP candidacy amongst what's going to be a very tough MVP race again this year. But he's been playing great. And they've had a good system going since Harden and Maxey have been back, where you have a little bit more true point guard play coming off the bench with Melton being in that starting lineup. You have Tyrese Maxey coming off the bench. Melton can run some point for you, but ideally, if you can use him as a spacer, as a 3-point shooter, and as a secondary ball handler, that's the ideal role for him. So they've got a nice balance going over there. They've finally got some pieces being put together in the right places where the system is working for them to have that level of success. And most importantly, they look like as good of a defensive team as they should be. They look like they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
one of the best defensive teams in the league. They've been that over the last month and a half or so. If they can continue that, then this team definitely has a chance to make some dents in the Eastern Conference come the back end of the playoffs.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. But I agree with you. I think they're playing really comfortable, and I think the one thing that you're not seeing right now is like no, not really much of like the ego thing. Like Maxi came back and he basically said like, I'm fine to come off the bench for a couple games. It's just trying out like what Doc wants, and then like even Harden, like early in the year. They weren't winning much, but Harden, was playing really good, and there were some people who were saying, okay, yeah, maybe his stats are up, but maybe he's like taking too many of the shots. Like Embiid needs more looks, or Maxey needs more looks, or Tobias Harris. And ever since then, he's averaging like I believe like 11 assists now or something like that on the season. So he's definitely adjusting to that role. And like you said, like with Melton off the bench, who personally I've always been high on him. I think he was kind of a little slept on when he was with Memphis. And then Shake Milton as well. And really, I think Montrezl Harrell has started to play well lately to the point where it's like, I feel like people thought like maybe, oh, the takeaway of the year for him at least would probably be that latter thing with Giannis. He's starting to play pretty well lately to the point where, people aren't really going to remember that, or at least it will be like way down the line and something that's randomly brought up. But and then also like PJ Tucker, like I know he just had the other night another 0 point game, but it seemed like early on like they didn't really know what his role would be, and it seems like now like he's kind of more in the corner, which is probably that corner three is something that he's probably hit more than anyone over the past like what 6-7 seasons or something like that. And just locking down. He's a great interior defender when you need him, especially for like those like forwards, like when you're playing a Kevin Durant in the playoffs, when you're playing a Giannis. He knows him to the point where they were at least teammates when they won that championship. So it's all kind of coming together, and you just hope, at least for their sake, that it kind of stays this way. And it should be interesting to see like what the minutes look like and the rotation. And I'm just kind of intrigued by this team just to see how Doc ends up like maneuvering, like what 8 or 9 guys are going to be playing in the playoffs and how much, and like who's going to start and everything like that. Because right now I feel like there's a few different ways he could go, but I don't know. I think they've been playing well. Like I said, they did just lose to Orlando, which is unfortunate. But you got any other final thoughts about Philly before we move on here?
I was just gonna say, like, I'm glad you touched on them looking so much more like a unit because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's been the big thing. Is even though, like you mentioned, there is probably some questions and some decisions that are going to have to get made about who gets what minutes, who fills in where in the rotations, because there is just that much quality on this team when you deal with Maxi and Melton and how those minutes get split and the role of PJ Tucker comes in and how much minutes Jake Milton gets. Those types of questions still have to be answered, but this is the most the Philly team has looked like a unit on the floor in a while. And it usually hasn't been a question mark of whether they have the talent for the 76ers. It's usually been a question of how does it fit together and how do they perform as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks the most unified they have been on the court in a while and finally having some success because of it.
Yeah, I think even Embiid said like this might be the best team they've had. I don't know if he said like ever since like he's been on the team or since that like Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick team. But yeah, it's been a while since I've seen a Sixers team look this cohesive. So it should be interesting. But if you want, we can move on to a team who hasn't been looking too cohesive lately, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans. I think now they're up to 9 straight losses, which is a league high right now. This is a team who, at points early in the year, like the first, after probably like 15, 20-ish games, they did hold, I think, the number 1 seed for a couple days here and there. But for a while, they were in third. And ever since then, the West is so compact that they've slid all the way down to, I believe I don't have the standings in front of me, but I think I saw they're in like 10th or something now. And that's just tough. I mean, obviously Zion has missed like a month now. Brandon Ingram's missed several games. Like Herb Jones has had injuries and stuff like that. So they've been kind of banged up. But, I mean, now you got Ingram back, and we're still kind of just waiting on Zion. But I don't know. Do you think maybe this 9-game losing streak could come back to haunt them, or what do you see from the Pelicans, moving forward here up in like the last 2-ish months of the season?
I think they're going to be frustrated that they're in the spot they're in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to be too mad at themselves, though, because, like you say, they have struggled with injuries so much. Even though the roster isn't terrible without Zion and without Ingram, you're without an All NBA and an All Star caliber guy, you're going to struggle. That's just the reality of the situation. And
Mm-hmm.
CJ's tried to keep them afloat a bit, and he has played better ball throughout the stretch than he was earlier on in the season. He's still just playing as good a basketball as a complementary option, as your second or third guy, which is what he's there to do. Unfortunately, they just need a little bit more from him right now. And when you talk about Ion being out, Brandon Ingram being out, Herb Jones being in and out of the lineup, the defense hasn't helped from that either. I mean, Herb Jones is one of the best defenders at his role in the league. Ion has improved a bit on that end. Brandon Ingram has shown flashes on that end. I mean, they're just not quite as cohesive and competent on that end without those guys. So it's not just the offense they're lacking. They've had some good performances from some role players too. It's not that they're completely devoid of talent, but it definitely falls off pretty quickly from Zion and Brandon Ingram to who they have behind those guys. When you're looking at Jones picking up minutes when he's been in the lineup, you're looking at Trey Murphy, who's had a good year, but is
Mm-hmm.
nowhere near those guys. Same thing for someone like Najee Marshall. They don't quite have that level of talent to pick up the slack because most teams don't have the talent to pick up the slack from a Zion and a Brandon Ingram. So it's going to suck because, like you said, they were amongst the top 3 seeds in the West for a while, and they had a legitimate shot at home court advantage. West is still tight, so that's very possible, but they're going to have an uphill battle to do so now. They have to kind of get out of this funk just to get some confidence back. I think they still have a chance as long as they can stay healthy. Of course, Brandon Ingram's working his way back in now. Hopefully Zion is back in the next few weeks as well. But as long as they can stay healthy, should be okay, but they definitely need to get healthy, and that's the biggest concern for me right now. I'm more concerned about their ability to stay healthy than I am about their ability to play well once they have everyone back.
Yeah, I think realistically, like you said, I think it all starts with their health and kind of with Zion especially. This whole losing streak happening like without him. And I know they've played kind of harder teams, but I mean, I just pulled up their schedule and they played teams like Orlando in that mix. They've played the Wizards. I think the Cavaliers game, I don't think Donovan Mitchell played that game. I mean, those are probably winnable games, but just kind of getting a little bit unlucky. Now, I think they're probably going to catch a little bit of a break because I don't know if I think Woj tweeted out or at least like the Pistons Wizards game for tonight is like postponed or something because the Pistons like can't get out of Dallas, and that's where the next game is for New Orleans. So maybe they catch a break and they have to play that later when they're more healthy or something like that. I don't know. And then their next couple games, they got Lakers, Kings, Hawks, Cavs, Thunder. I mean, maybe they could pull off a few wins in there. I would expect at least. So eventually they're going to have to turn it around. But one thing I will say about the Pelicans is that, you definitely can't count them out, especially because they kind of had this last year, right? It's just kind of came at better timing, just really early, like the first few weeks of the season. But at the same time, they weren't in this position right here. I mean, like you said, they still could have home court advantage. They're only I think not even 2 games back of the Clippers or something like that. And I think they're only 3.5 of the Kings. So they could definitely get back up to there. I think the big thing is just getting to the playoffs with, all their guys. So especially, right now they've just had some guys out. I mean, whether it was Ingram for one stretch or Zion for another, or Herb Jones and stuff like that, and just other guys need to step up too, off the bench, like Trey Murphy and Alvarado, Larry Nance Jr., all these guys, it's going to be dependent on them too to get to where they want to be. So, I mean, I don't know. I think Willie Green definitely pushes his players. I've seen actually Pelicans fans, it might just be the heat of the moment, but they've kind of been turning against Willie Green, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I don't know. I mean, we'll just have to see. Definitely, and still, it's not like a finished situation. There's still plenty of time left in the year, but eventually they're gonna have to catch a win. If that Mavericks game does end up getting pushed back, their next game is against the Lakers. Maybe Brandon Ingram will go off because it seems like he always goes off against the Lakers anymore. So maybe they can hope for that, and maybe that can turn the tides a little bit. But I don't know. You seen anything else from the Pelicans?
Yeah, like you say, they just need a big Brandon Ingram game or a big CJ game and to get out of the rut. And we've seen this team without Zion have success before. We saw it at the end of last year. Saw them make a run into the playoffs and have a fairly competitive playoff series without Zion. So there's reason to believe with Brandon Ingram back now, as long as he can get his shooting form back before too long, that they can at least tread water until Zion's back. They should be at least be able to do that and keep themselves relevant in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think they're confident too. If the way they competed with Phoenix last year in the playoffs, if we have Zion, maybe we could push anybody to the limits. We could maybe compete with just about anybody. So we'll have to see how that goes. But if you want, we can move on. We could talk about one player who's been in trade talks for who knows how long. It seems like every year he's in a new trade rumor. It just seems like lately it's probably been heating up the most in a while, and that is Myles Turner, who recently by the Pacers just got an interesting renegotiation extension. I can't think of too many off the top of my head that have happened like that, mid-season at least, or at least this close to the trade deadline. But apparently onto this season, they're tacking on another $17 million to his already $18 million salary, and then the next 2 years I think it's an average of $30 million for each year, which I mean personally for me I feel like that's a lot. I know Turner's great and everything, but I felt like it was a little bit too much. But just for a guy that we've seen in trade rumors probably as early as the days that, Paul George was still on the team, at least to some capacity, and he's still in trade rumors, yet he just gets extended like this out of the blue just before the trade deadline. What do you make of this for not only him to, agree to this renegotiation extension, but also the Pacers for going all in for Myles Turner?
Well, first off, I have to say, hopefully we get a little bit of a postponement for a year or two from the Myles Turner trade talks because of this extension. So that would be nice to see. But full credit to Myles Turner. He's had a really good year this year, an absolute career year alongside Halliburton, and with Sabonis out of town being the only true big man in the front court. And Halliburton's got all the love, and he is the better player, no doubt. But Myles Turner's definitely had a career year and deserved to get pretty penny, whether it was from the Pacers or otherwise. So full credit to him on that. From the Pacers standpoint, I don't mind it. He's still only mid-20s. He's got a lot of good basketball ahead of him. It's clear that him and Tyrese Halliburton play well together. They're both having career years, partly in fact of how good they can play together. And now part of it just is the fact that Myles Turner is shooting efficiently way beyond his capacities that he ever has done in previous seasons. I mean, he's up at nearly 40% from three this year, which is just not something we've ever seen from Myles Turner before. As long as he continues to produce like this, the Pacers have their center of the future. And even though they've slipped in the last few weeks with Halliburton missing some time, they've shown that they're better than we expected going into the season, and their timeline might be a little bit ahead of schedule compared to what we thought heading into the season. They might be able to win some games a little bit sooner than we expected. So given the fact that they've been as competitive as they have been, and given the fact they've been successful as they have been as long as Halliburton's in the lineup, I like the fact they're keeping him around. Gives you some good spacing on the offensive end. He can give you something out of the pick and roll, and he still continues to be a fairly good rim protector and shot blocker. So I like the deal. You argue it's a little bit too much money, maybe, but I think it's a good deal. And if nothing else, if they really want to, they can move him for another big salary down the road if they wanted to include him in a star trade. So I think it still gives them lots of flexibility. I think it helps them continue to remain competitive, which clearly have shown that they can do a lot sooner than most of us expected.
Yeah, I will say, I guess I was kind of doing a little disservice to Myles Turner. I think he's definitely worth, like you said, a decent payday for the simple fact that this is probably his best season in the NBA so far. It just seemed like a weird timing just because, the Pacers have been playing kind of bad, and we don't know where they're going to finish, at least this season. If this happened maybe a month ago, it would probably make even a little bit more sense just because, they were like, I think around 6th, 7th, 8th, like somewhere in there at that time. And then Halliburton's young, Ben Mathurin, Nembhard, they got a lot of building block pieces for the future around him too. But no, I think Myles Turner, the reason he's in trade talks so much is just because, he's almost like that ideal center, that he's the guy who can lock down in the paint. Even not too bad for centers, I would say, switching to guard on the perimeter. He's not perfect at it, but he can hold his own at least most of the time. And then in terms of three-point shooting, he is a little inconsistent. I know he's always been able to really shoot it for the last several seasons, but he's always been up and down. Maybe one game he goes 5 of 7, and the next game he goes 1 of 6 or something like that. That's just kind of been the player he's been. But like you said, this year, he's kind of stepped up in that department. I would like to see him maybe, still improve a little bit as a rebounder. I think that's going to be important. And I know he plays out by the three-point line a lot on offense, but at least on the defensive end, we could see it. Like I said, if they're switching him out and he's guarding someone on the perimeter, I guess that's a little bit different. But I still think he could improve in that department as well. But I don't know. I don't think it's a bad move by any means. I am kind of surprised that they gave him that extra money this year too. But, I guess it all goes back to, the summer. If you remember, when they offered DeAndre Ayton that offer sheet, so they kind of had money to play around with. And I think they're just rewarding Turner for the simple fact that, like you said, this is his best year. He's the same position that they were trying to go after in DeAndre Ayton. And, he's really been loyal with them just like they've been loyal with him ever since he came in the NBA. So, credit Turner. Like I said, I do think it's a little much. Maybe like bring it down to like 50 million over the next 2 years or something like that. Like I feel like that's maybe more reasonable, but I don't know. You got any other thoughts about this extension renegotiation thing?
Oh, not really, but like you say, it's definitely weird. Like it's not typically a time of year you see an extension, and it's
Mm.
not typical that you see a guy get an extra lump sum of money mid-season, but played well, and if the Pacers got the money to pay to their guys that they want as their core moving forward, then a little better to them to make sure that they're well paid and they're happy to stick around.
Especially when you've lost like 9 of your last like 10 or so games. So
That
I
really
was
helps.
I was really surprised by that. But yeah, if you want though, we can move on. We can move back to the Western Conference and talk about one team in particular who, you know, says they're fine in the West, of course, above everyone else. But I think the one thing we're going to be talking about with this is just something interesting that I saw on Twitter, and it revolves around Jaren Jackson Jr. And, apparently there's like a big scandal going on about how like the Grizzlies scorekeeper is kind of forging his, total blocks, and, he's getting more than he should. I believe currently he still is leading the league in like blocks per game for qualifiers. So it's kind of interesting. And then I don't know if you saw today, like there was something with Draymond saying like he feels like he's being cut out of like steals and blocks or something. I guess like, you could, I guess, touch on, Memphis in specifics, but just as a whole, like, what do you think like this, I guess, means like for the NBA? Like, what do you see from the situation, like with the scorekeeping or whatever? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, as a whole, I feel like there's always going to be a little bit more subjectivity
Mm.
with some statistical calls. Blocks can be one of them on some tough calls, on some tips, on some fine touches that you might get those recorded as blocks at home and you might not on the road. Assists is no different. You might get a bit more of a favorable recording of your assist numbers at home compared to on the road. And just given the fact that a catch and shoot, that's always going to be an assist, but a guy might take a couple dribbles and you might get that as an assist at home and you might not get that on the road. And that's just always going to be the nature of statistical recording in the NBA unless it's something that is truly defined and has a rigid definition. Some things that are always going to be on the edges like that can vary things a little bit. But some influencing factors as well that are just going to lead to Jaren's numbers being bigger at home as far as his block numbers go. Memphis are just a better defense at home, and they're a better team at home by a significant margin. I mean, they've been struggling over the last little bit. They had been on a losing skid, and they had a 5-game road streak, and they lost all 5 of those. Defense was not great during those games. Now, given they've been without a few pieces that are core to their defense throughout that, mainly Steven Adams, but nonetheless, teams feed off of their crowd at home. They play better defense at home from that. And you get a lot more energy from your crowd when you're getting a block at home. And so when you get that first one and the crowd goes crazy, you might be looking for that second and that third one a little bit more than you are compared to when you're on the road where you just might go for a shot contest as opposed to swinging for that block. So there's a lot of other influencing factors that skew those numbers at home a little bit greater than they are away. But there's always going to be a little bit of subjectivity in home versus away statistical lines for stuff like that, where there is some subjectivity. I mean, a rebound is a rebound, and for the most part, a turnover is a turnover, but there's going to be some stats that are always a little bit more of a gray area as whether it was an assist or it wasn't, or it was a block and it wasn't. And sometimes that's just going to have a little bit of a debate, but for the most part, I don't think there's that significant of a skewing one way or another from pretty much anyone across the league. Could it become a problem? Sure, but I think it would have to become pretty obvious and pretty significant for that to happen, and I don't know how well anyone can get away with that when there's so many people watching games on any given night. Even though Jaren might have a really good performance one night, if he has 3 actual blocks in a game and they start recording him with 6, some eyebrows are probably going to get raised from people watching the game before people start deep diving into it later on, weeks later, and start to recognize something.
Yeah, I think the other thing that made people maybe interested in particular with this is just because, like, I mean, Jaren Jackson, as much as he is one of the leaders in blocks for the league, like, he also is often in foul trouble. And so, like, people are like, oh, like, you're giving him extra blocks and stuff like that. Like, I mean, personally, we don't know how many of these, like, came in, like, the final minutes or anything like that. And quite frankly, I don't care enough to go back and look at every single called Jaren Jackson Jr. block. And I don't think really anyone was like, oh, wait, like, I need to look at all of them and see which ones were called and which ones, like, shouldn't have been. But I don't know. Like you said, like, it's something that's going to happen no matter what. And it could even be something that's, like, kind of hard to judge. I mean, like, when you were talking there, I was kind of thinking, like, I think other than points, like, unless, like, maybe you just, like, throw it off someone's head or something, or, like, the defender tips it in, like, I feel like it's pretty easy to tell, like, at least for points, like, who's scoring. But, like, an assist, like, you could pass to someone, and if they take 2 dribbles, like, maybe some scorekeepers won't count that, maybe some will. Or, like, a rebound, like, if you tip it and, like, save it to your guy, like, they might count that as whoever catches it in bounds instead of that. Or, like, the steal, like, whether it's off the deflection or catching it. And then for blocks, like, it could be like, maybe you just hit the ball or something and then make them lose grip of the ball or something. They just shoot it wrong. Like, some people might count it as a block, others might not. So, I mean, it's going to be different no matter what. I don't think it changes the outlook of the Grizzlies, though. Like, they've still been one of the best defensive teams in the league. And I feel like there might be, like, not a whole lot of people, but probably about 10 to 15% of people that probably, like, look at it as like, oh yeah, like, they're not really that great defensively. Their Grizzly scorekeepers are, just messing with the numbers or something like that. Which I think it even goes deeper than that, anyways. Like, it's about, like, contesting shots and, like, moving your feet and stuff like that, lateral quickness. I think all that goes into the defense as well. It's not just, like, how many shots you block. But I don't know. I think this is kind of just silly. And I thought it was really silly, like, even when Draymond was talking about it today. Like, I think my numbers, like, 2 and stuff like that, like, come on. Like, I don't know. I just think it's kind of, like, ridiculous. But I don't know. You got anything else here?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it got a bit overblown, but like you say, if you watch Jaren Jackson Jr. play defense, if you watch the Grizzlies play defense, independent of the block numbers, independent of the metrics, they look good defensively. And Jaren Jackson Jr. looks very impactful defensively. And there's just stretches in a game. You just watch Jaren play defense, and it's like, okay, this guy is significantly altering the way the opposing team is playing on the offensive end. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, that's just what matters more. And the block numbers might get discussed, and they might get debated, and they might get thrown around defensive player of the year conversations. But you're watching him play defense. That's what truly shows how impactful he is on the defensive end, regardless of whether he's getting 1 block or 3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you there. But if you want, we can move on. We could talk about recently, over the past week, the All-Star starters got announced. And by the time my next episode comes out, probably be discussing a little bit about the reserves. But at least the All-Star starters have been announced, so we know. For the West, you got Curry, Luka, LeBron, Zion, and Jokic. And in the East, you got Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, Giannis, and Jason Tatum. I think the biggest surprise from most people is the fact that Joel Embiid was not an all-star starter, although, there was a lot of competition there, of course. I saw some people talking about Zion making it. I saw some people talking about Donovan Mitchell and Kyrie Irving. So I guess, like, I saw a few people even say about Curry as well. What do you make of, these all-star starters? Do you think should have been different? Anyone gets snubbed out of it? And, like, do you think maybe there should be a different format? I'll ask that, too, because I know some people were suggesting that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone got in wasn't deserving. I mean, there was a lot of guys who could have deserved to be all-star starters this year. I was definitely, can't say surprised by some of them, because some of these guys were going to get in just because of 50% of the vote is fan voting, and
Mhm.
these guys just had significant amount of votes. But Curry was one guy I personally wouldn't have had in just because he's missed some time compared to someone like SGA or even Ja. But Steph's been great this year, so I definitely can't be mad at him being an all-star starter. Kyrie was another guy who, and voting helped get him in. I probably would have had Jalen Brown, but you could have argued that either way, and they're both very deserving. And Zion, same thing. I mean, he's missed a lot of time now too. I probably wouldn't have had him as a starter, but he was so brilliant when he played, and he had enough fan voting that deserved to be in. So fair play to him. So then that's where the argument comes in, where should fan voting matter as much? If you really, really want to nitpick and care that much about the All Star selections, probably not. At the end of the day, fans aren't choosing the reserves. So the
Mhm.
reserves are still being chosen with a little bit more of a critical eye, although emphasis on a little bit more, because sometimes the selections from non-fan representatives can still be a little bit questionable. But even then, it's an all-star game. It's for the fans in the big scheme of things. It's the big event of the midseason in the NBA. So as much as personally I like to have it be an accurate team, I think it's going to be a weekend that's always for the fans. It's going to be an all-star voting selection that's always got to have some valuing of the fans' representation of who they want showing up. So
Mhm.
I think having the system as it is for the time being is probably a best combination of both worlds, of having best players on the court in your starting lineups, but also making sure you have who the fans want out there as well. And now, as far as Joel Embiid not making the starting lineup, I don't know if I can say I was surprised, because I think one way or another, one of those guys in the front court was going to have to get snubbed, and
Mhm.
all four of them deserve it. Personally, the only one for me that I thought was a lock, independent of fan voting, was Tatum, because I think Tatum's been the best of those four forwards this year, and he's been the most available of those four guys as well. I Giannis deserved it. KD deserved it. Embiid deserved it. I'll just say this much: Embiid might end up retiring as the most unlucky player ever in terms of
Mhm.
all-star nods, whether it be as a starter and in terms of accolades with all NBA teams. He deserves to be on some higher uh, all NBA teams or be named more as an all-star starter, a lot more than he has been. And hopefully, for his sake, that luck ends up turning around. But as long as he's playing in a conference with Tatum, Giannis, and KD, and is playing in a league that has Nikola Jokic, he might just continue to get unlucky.
Yeah, even yeah, like you said, even like MVPs and stuff. Like, I mean, right now he's probably. I think the recent ladder had him second, but only behind Jokic. Like, I mean, right now, like he could be looking at like his maybe third MVP if Jokic didn't exist or something. But I don't know. So I guess like for me, like I was kind of surprised that Embiid didn't make it, but I can't say like like you said, all those guys were deserving. Personally for me, I think like the most reasonable choice probably would have been at the point they decided probably Kevin Durant, just because he had missed some time right before then. But you could also look at, I mean, even though he was just missing time, I mean, Giannis has played just about the same amount of games too. But then, of course, you got Embiid. But, I mean, Embiid's also been playing really well lately and probably dominating. He's leading the league in scoring, and he's playing just at an insane level that it's hard to pick against him. But I think because those two guys, Giannis and KD, were so high in the fan voting, like I kind of knew they were going to be 1 and 2, and then there was a little drop off at the fans, and then you had Embiid and Tatum, and that's where I personally went with Embiid, and that's why I thought Tatum actually wasn't going to get in. But I'm not like surprised at all, and I think he also deserves it just because his team, they're the first seed, and he's playing at a high level too. I mean, he's up there with one of the 30-point per game scorers in the NBA. So I'm not really surprised by that. As for Donovan Mitchell and Kyrie Irving, like you said, I think really the only big snub here per se, maybe for starters, would be Jalen Brown, which maybe you could put him over Kyrie, but I just think Donovan Mitchell's had such a good season that I probably wouldn't put Jalen Brown over him. And personally, I did have Kyrie on mine, so I don't know about that. And the West, I know people were saying stuff about Zion, but I don't know. It's just hard because at the time, just about a week or so ago, like they were still third or fourth or something, right? Like this is what we were talking about. Everyone's so close. So I didn't really mind them, putting Zion in there. I know he's missed some games, but I don't know. I think honestly, like you said, I mean, probably was a little more surprised that Curry actually got in just because at the time they picked, they were like sitting in 8th or something or 9th. And you look at John Morant, I mean, his Grizzlies are up there. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's got this Thunder team around 500 when they really shouldn't have any business being around 500. I mean, they were one of the worst teams in the league last year, and their second overall pick hasn't played a game, right? So they were probably expected to be bad again. So I don't know. I mean, realistically, all these guys were going to make the All-Star team anyways, and I think like that's the thing people don't understand is that like when the season ends, I don't think anyone's really going to care like who starts in the All-Star game. Like they're just going to look and be like, were you an All-Star? Yeah. And then like you move on to the end of the year, were you All-NBA? Yes. Did you win a championship? Yes. Final. And then like it's kind of broken down into different categories, but in the end, I mean, making the All-Star team, I think that's the main thing here. All these guys were locks to make it regardless if off the bench or whatever. Same thing with Embiid, same thing with Jaylen Brown, and the other guys I mentioned, Ja, SGA. Like, they're all going to make it, but I don't know. You got anything else for this segment?
Yeah, like you say, like, as long as we're just voting in guys that are going to make it anyways, and it's pretty inconsequential at the end of the day. As long as the guys are still getting named All-Stars, it's all good. Now, when the day comes that we start voting in Austin Reeves, that's another discussion. But we're not there yet, but we're good for now.
They should have a game for people that, like, are high in the votes that, like, just didn't get in. Like an Austin Reeves, a Kevon Looney. Just put everyone in there that, got a lot of votes that has no chance of making it. I would pay to see that, but, yeah. If you want, though, we can progress here and move on to the NBA 20 questions game. So, I talked with you before. You said you are familiar with the rules, but I'm going to explain them for anyone new watching. So basically, my guy run the NBA here. He's going to ask me at maximum 20 yes or no questions, hint-related questions to try and get an idea for the NBA-related thing that I'm posing to him. It could be a current player, a former player, a team, a coach, anything of that nature. And after every hint-related question, you're allowed one guess, and that won't count against you. But you get more points for using less questions to ask me. So, like, if you get it after one question used, it's 20 points. 2 questions, that's 19 points, and so on. There's 3 questions overall, so that's 60 possible points. But other than that, I think that's all the rules. So are you ready for the 20 questions?
I'm ready to go.
All right.
Is it an active player?
It is. Let me track it.
Does he play in the Eastern Conference?
No.
Oh, Eastern Conference. Okay. Does he play in the Pacific Division?
No.
Oh, does he play in the Southwest Division?
No.
Oh. Okay. Is he a former All-Star?
Did you say, is he a former All-Star?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I should probably start taking a few guesses. Is it Damian Lillard?
It is not Damian Lillard. So like I said, that doesn't count against you. You've only used 5. So yeah.
Okay. Is he a guard?
No.
No, it's not a guard. I'll guess Karl Anthony Towns.
It is Karl Anthony Towns.
It is Karl Anthony Towns. Okay.
All right. So for that one, you used 6 questions. So that means you got 15 points. So that's not bad. That's pretty good. Now, I feel like the trend, as usually we go on here, is that it gets a little bit harder. Not entirely harder, but just a little bit. So you got 15 right now, but are you ready for the second one?
I'm ready.
All right, you can ask away.
Is it an active player?
It is not an active player.
It's not an active player. Is it a former player?
It is a former player.
Okay. Were they ever an All-Star?
Yes.
Yes. Have they played in the league since 2010?
Yes.
Yes. Well, this is when it gets tough. Team he played for the most, was it a Western Conference team?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Was that team in the Southwest Division?
No.
Was that team in the Pacific Division?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I like the way you're narrowing it down. Like, I feel like not everyone goes this route, but I feel like it's the most simple way. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's too tough otherwise. Well, let's take a stab at it. Is it DeMarcus Cousins?
It is not DeMarcus Cousins.
It's not DeMarcus Cousins. Okay. Is he a guard?
He is a guard, yes.
Is a guard. Okay. Former player. This is tough. Did he play the most with the Clippers?
No.
No Clippers. Okay. I'll make a guess. Kobe.
It is not Kobe.
It's not Kobe. Okay. Did he play his most games with the Suns?
He did, yes.
Did. Okay. Former Suns guard. Was an all-star. Was not an active player. Has he been a coach in the NBA?
Yes, he has.
Okay, so I'm gonna guess Steve Nash.
It is Steve Nash. Yeah.
Steve Nash. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Not bad. So that one used 11 questions, still got 10 points. So it's pretty good. So right now you're sitting at 25. I think the ultimate leader is 39 on the leaderboard.
39.
So if you can get this one in 6 questions, you'll be the ultimate leader. If not, you'll still be up there as somewhere up there. But yeah. So are you ready for the third question?
I'm ready to go.
All right. You can ask away.
Is it an active player?
It is not an active player.
Okay, is it a former player?
It is not a former player.
Not a former player. Is it a team?
It is a team, yes.
It is a team. Okay. Now, when you say team, are you just referencing franchise or are you referencing a specific team in a specific year?
Um, no, like it's a franchise. No, it's not like the 2015-16 Warriors or something like that. No,
Okay. Okay.
I
Okay.
won't I
Uh,
won't count that against you either because that was like you didn't know question.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to make sure. Are they an Eastern Conference team?
Yes.
Yes. Are they in the Atlantic Division?
No.
No. Okay, I'll take a guess and say the Chicago Bulls.
It is not the Chicago Bulls. But
It's not the Chicago
I like
Bulls.
I like where you're heading with that because I'm a Bulls fan.
Had had to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Are they a Southeast Division team?
They are not a Southeast Division team.
Okay, so I will take a guess and say the Detroit Pistons.
It is not the Detroit Pistons, unfortunately.
Okay.
I feel like you really narrowed it down though. You're only
I got three teams. Okay, next question. Has Giannis ever played for this team?
No.
Is it the Cleveland Cavaliers?
It is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yeah. Um, he could have played for them if they picked a number one overall instead of Anthony Bennett, but
And it would have been a lot better for it, but here we are.
I can only imagine like people would have been so much more confused at the time if that actually happened. Like people were already questioning the Bennett pick. If they saw like Giannis get picked number one, I don't even know how they would have reacted.
That'd have been crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, you still did pretty good. I'm trying to see. So, you 7. I think actually maybe you did get it. I think you did get 39 points. So you tied, I think, the leaderboard right now. I'll have it on the bottom line here, but I'll have to go back and double check. I think you tied it. But I mean, yeah, I think you did pretty good. Very solid showing. How do you think you did?
I think it was a solid performance, given it was my first time at the game. I'll take being near at the top.
Yeah. But before we close out, I have been asking my guests this one question at the end of every episode. I plan to use it later in the season, and that is for you to give me. It could be a current player or a former player. Give me one NBA player that you do like and one NBA player you don't like. And if it's someone that's already been said, I'll just ask you for another one. So,
Okay. NBA player that I do like, we're gonna go with Wendell Carter Jr.
I don't think he's been said. All right, that's a solid choice. Any reason why?
I just think he has a sound game defensively, and his offensive game for being a 6'11", 250-pound center is so unique from being able to post up, but also occasionally shooting threes and hitting step back middies.
Mm.
This has such a weird blend of an offensive game and does it really productively.
Yeah, former Bull. But yeah, you got who's someone that you aren't fond of? It could be someone you don't like him at all, or maybe someone who always beats your team in the playoffs or something. Or who do you think?
Someone I'm not fond of, nothing against the person, but because I like myself a good defensive center, Yusef Nurkic is my pick.
All right. Yeah, that's a solid pick. I saw someone today, I don't remember who, but they said something like if the Blazers are serious, they got to move on from Nurkic. He can't be in the future. But yeah, no, I feel you with that. Actually, it's funny you picked two guys that were drafted by the Bulls because Nurkic and Gary Harris were drafted by us, and then we traded them for Doug McDermott. That didn't end well, but it is what it is. It is what it is. But other than that, though, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thank you guys for watching. You got any final thoughts before we close up?
Oh, just thanks for having me on, man. It was a good time.
Appreciate it. And I'll have his link in the description below. That's why I'll have check description like I usually do at the bottom. But other than that, though, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.